Hi, I'm Charles Feldman, and I want to welcome you to another episode of SOS America. And if you haven't seen or listened to us thus far, just briefly, let me tell you a little bit about what this podcast is about. The title, I think, is somewhat self-explanatory. SOS, of course, being a universally recognized distress signal. And so SOS America is a podcast about what is happening now here in the United States, how it impacts not only people here, but perhaps more importantly, how it impacts you if you happen to be listening or watching this outside of the United States. It may be a time when you're wondering whether it's worth taking a trip here or maybe moving here. Or maybe, I've said this before, maybe you have a child who's interested in going to school in the US, and now maybe you're kind of a little bit nervous about it because you read the headlines and you see what's happening on television, and there are all kinds of immigration rates, things of that sort. So it's a very turbulent time here in the United States, and I don't think that that is hyperbole by any means. And so I welcome you again to another edition of SOS America, and I'll remind you guys at the end any comments that you may have, good or bad, we appreciate, and we will read them and look at them and maybe even respond to them. It all depends on time, but we do welcome that. Okay, so with that said, let me welcome our two guests for this particular episode. They are Zeena Luchowa and Christi Jackson. They are partners in the Laura Devine Immigration. I was going to say company, guys, but how would you characterize it? For law firm.
Yeah.
Law firm. Okay, there you go. It's a law firm. Um, and Zeena, as I understand it, you deal mostly with issues that would involve, say, somebody here in the US wanting to move to the UK and how they would deal with that and citizenship questions, things of that nature. Am I right about that?
Exactly that, yes. Helping individuals and companies who might be looking to relocate to the UK, set up business here, but also right through to citizenship as well.
All right, very good. And Christy, you have sort of the it's almost the mirror of that, right? I mean, you are really dealing with issues involving people who are in the UK who want to come to the United States, right?
That's right. So I help people with their visa applications to go to the U.S. Either temporarily to work or visit or study, as you said, as well as assisting U.S. citizens who are based in the U.K. With things such as renunciation of U.S. citizenship or naturalizing, doing consular report of birth abroad to obtain citizenship for their children who are born in the UK. So help US citizens, but mostly is doing visa work, sending people to the US.
Let me start off with a very broad question, because I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the reason why it's called SOS America is because we are in a very turbulent and interesting time in the United States politically, and it is sending, I dare say, shock waves all over the world for many different reasons. Some of it is for cultural reasons, some of it political, and some of it, of course, economic. So my broad question to both of you is, are these ripples, as I put it before, being felt to any large degree in your view in the UK? And if so, how does it manifest itself in terms of what you do? Whoever wants to start off.
I'm happy to start. We are certainly seeing an increase in inquiries from Americans who want to explore the feasibility of moving to the UK, albeit not necessarily translating into an immediate surge in relocation to the UK, but the inquiries are certainly on the increase. So, for example, our US team that's based in New York, they have seen 3 times as many inquiries from US nationals wanting to relocate to the UK this year compared to the previous year. So yes, we are certainly seeing that.
What do they say? Is there a theme that runs through the narrative?
So there's a bit of a mix in terms of the types of questions that we're getting. Um, some of the questions seem to be around individuals who may have a partner who's British, and so they have a route to enter via that family link. But we also have individuals who want to come to the UK on a long-term basis for reasons related to retirement, or we've had queries from those who are digital nomads who don't necessarily have a role as yet, but want to explore, or how can I move to the UK? And one other quite interesting development is that we are seeing more individuals explore any UK ancestry links. So that
Hmm.
exploring both, in terms of parents who may have been born in the UK or otherwise have British citizenship, but also their grandparents, because there has been there is an option for individuals to apply for British citizenship by way of registration, um, uh, where they have an ancestry link.
Christy, what about from your point of view? How is what's happening here in the U.S. now uh, showing up on sort of your plate, if it is?
It is. It is for sure. I think in a very different way, though,
Mhm.
to some extent, because um, people still want to go to the US, especially for business reasons. It's obviously a commercial capital. And like it or not, business is done in the US. And so people are still needing to go, whether that's expanding their companies or sending employees for existing companies and things like that. So uh, we have not in any way slowed down on the number of inquiries for people wanting to go to the US. As you might think, people would say, no, we're gonna tap out, because if you look at the overall figures, tourism generally is down in the US. That's quite
Yeah.
that's quite and quite a bit. And some countries more than others. I think Canada is quite a resounding uh, boycott. Um,
Yeah, the Canadians don't like us
no,
anymore.
the Canadians are done. Denmark's done. Um,
Yeah.
but I think at least from the UK and generally Europe, but I think business reasons are still going ahead. So we haven't seen any reduction there. What we have seen is uh, quite a lot more difficulty to get cases approved. The one of the executive orders that President Trump signed is the America First executive order, and it sort of does what it says on the tin. It's making visa applications harder. It's very similar to his first presidency, the Buy American, Hire American
Mhm.
order, and we had similar issues there, where a case that would have been approved 2 years ago is now getting pushed back. So it is making it harder, and I think um, we've also got additional issues with um, criminal issues. So whereas previously, if someone had a criminal issue, maybe not one that actually would render them inadmissible, it was something very minor, and historically would cause no problems. They just declare it, they get the visa, and they go to the US. At least in London, at the embassy in London, we're seeing almost a blanket refusal for individuals who have any criminal history, even when it was just an arrest. Um, it doesn't necessarily seem to be the case in every consular post. So this could be a very London specific as opposed to an administration specific agenda, or maybe it just hasn't trickled down everywhere yet. So it's something we're watching very, very closely. I have a lot of clients who have criminal histories. Again, often very minor.
Mhm.
It's a bit of an issue. And then, as I'm sure you're aware, and you sort of alluded to before, a lot of people want to send their kids to the U.S. To study, um, and we had a complete hiatus on student visas, while the administration worked out a way that they could increase the vetting of these students, but specifically related to students' social media. And when they finally, after a number of weeks offline, no visa appointments, they finally came back on with an explicit directive that a student who applied for a student visa must set their social media profiles to public, and failure to do so would lead to a denial on the basis that they would assume that they were trying to hide information. And that information, as we know, based on other evidence, is that they want to make sure that there are no posts in support of Palestine, which in the Trump administration's view is a supporter of Hamas and a supporter of terrorism, and as well as any anti-Trump rhetoric on their social media. So even though, despite that, as soon as they came back online, students are still applying. So people are still going to the US. Now, the flip side of that is renunciations continue with zeal. They have gone up. 2000 was the highest year, but they are still up this year compared to last year. There are a number of people that we are contacted by regularly to renounce US citizenship.
Zeena, let's say I wanted to, for whatever reason, but maybe politically, I wanted to move on a permanent basis to the UK. How does it actually work? Is it an easy process? Is it difficult? How many different hoops does one have to jump through?
Depends on your reason for moving to the UK. So say if you were moving because you had a partner who was British or was settled, then you would need to, the hoops would be about the requirements that you need to meet. There's a financial requirement, for example, demonstrating that your partner earns at least £29,000 per year, or you have savings of a significant amount that you've had for 6 months. You've also got work.
What would be a significant amount?
So currently that's £88,500 that you've had in your account, either you, your partner, or jointly, that you've had for at least 6 months, and it hasn't dipped below that in the last 6 months prior to your application. There are other requirements for this route, but typically in terms of getting the application together, it would involve an online application. It would involve an appointment to have your biometrics enrolled. And then once a decision is issued, which typically for a family application, typically it could take 4 weeks if it's a priority route, or 8 to 12 weeks if it's a standard route. Now, after that, once it's approved, you will get access to what's called an e-visa, which is a new sort of process that's been set up for individuals who are granted immigration permission. And once you have that e-visa in place, you can travel to the UK. It's not as straightforward as being able to, talking about the family route to start with, it's not as straightforward as being able to get the visa, travel to the UK, and not worry about it for 5 years. Not at all, because a family visa is valid for typically 2.5 years. After 2.5 years, you have to demonstrate the requirements, pay the relevant fees again, and then you'd be granted further permission for another 2.5 years. Once you get to the 5-year point, then you can apply to settle in the UK, which essentially means that you would have no restrictions that's tied to being a family member at that point. And then if you wished to settle, if you wish to apply for British citizenship by way of naturalization, If you are not married or in a civil partnership with a British citizen, so say if it's an individual that's got indefinite leave to remain, you'd have to wait another year before you could naturalize. Otherwise, you could typically apply straight away. But even in relation to that, there are provisions around when it comes to naturalization. There are provisions around strict residence requirements and days that you have to show that you've been in the UK over the relevant 3 or 5 year period, depending on which route you go through, to be eligible to naturalise. So there's hoops along the way. If your ultimate goal is to permanently settle here or to get citizenship, it's not. You'd need to be thinking about it early on.
And yet, you both are saying that there's a sizable, maybe that's too strong a word, but a noticeable anyway, uptick in Americans who want to do that, right? Who want to come to the UK and live there permanently. Is that right?
Well, sorry, go.
No. I was going to say, but if I'm right about that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I am curious. What do they say when they're being candid with you in a kind of lawyer-client relationship? What reasons do they give for wanting to go through a process that clearly isn't easy? I mean, just listening to you tick off all the things that one has to do, it's quite a bit. So one has to be really motivated, I would think, to do something like that. So what do they say?
In our experience, there are a number of reasons for individuals who are telling us that they wish to explore moving to the UK. But what we are seeing an uptick in terms of the interest and exploration, we're seeing reasons that are related to political situation in the US, and also, whether it's we're seeing. Sorry, I need to start that one again.
No, go ahead. Good.
We are seeing reasons related to political motivations for leaving the US, but we're also seeing individuals wanting to come to the UK for security and stability reasons. There have been individuals that are able to bypass these hoops if they're able to apply to register as British citizens immediately. Those individuals, not necessarily all, but such individuals are looking for, say, an insurance policy, having the UK as a plan B in case, staying in the US on a long-term basis doesn't necessarily work out for either them or their children.
I think Zeena has a really good point here. Sorry to jump in.
No, go ahead.
And so I'm American and I live in the United Kingdom and have done for almost 10 years. I have indefinite leave to remain in the United Kingdom, which is the equivalent of sort of a green card. So I can stay here permanently for as long as I want to. And I've been eligible to naturalize for so long. And this is definitely a do as I say, not as I do. I tell clients all the time, naturalize the second. I just haven't done it. And Zeena and I were chatting about this, and it would be something as an American that I feel like I should do, because if it came to it and I needed to be aligned with a country that aligned with my values and my my family's values, I would like to have the backup of having a British passport. If things change, if the political climate changed, if we engaged in a war, a large scale war, these are all things that I know seem so far fetched, or at least at one time seemed so far fetched, and I don't think they seem so far fetched anymore. When you're thinking back to sort of World War II, where people were like, "Where can we go?" I want to have the ability to have a choice. And I think a lot of people, like what Zeena's saying, is it's having the flexibility to have of which country would I want to go to. if I needed to go, or so I do think some flexibility is good there. Whether that's politically motivated or not, I think it's just the having the options.
And to be clear about this, the UK, I guess, permits dual citizenship. The US does, right? So,
The U.S. does, and the UK, but Zeena can answer.
It does, yes. Yeah.
so let me sort of take this from a slightly different angle, because listening to what both of you have been saying, uh, hypothetical question, and maybe there's actually real world answers to this hypothetical question. So somebody from the U.S., right? They come perhaps to you, Zeena, and they say, we want to move to the UK. They do all the things that you ticked off, or some of the things anyway, and then they move to the UK permanently or semi-permanently, whatever. So now back to you, Christy. Considering all the obstacles that the U.S. is now putting in the way of many different kinds of people coming to the U.S., does that in and of itself make it difficult for that person who has decided to emigrate to the UK when they want to go back to the US? You know what I'm saying?
No, I mean, I think, look, we could use me as an example. So
Okay.
I immigrated to the UK. I came in, I got a visa. I then applied for indefinite leave. My whole family is here. We're all American. Uh, if I wanted to go back to the US as an American, that's obviously fine. If that was something I wanted to do, we could all pack up tomorrow. More often, we obviously see people who come single and then they marry a Brit. Now we have to talk about how do they get their British family to the U.S. Uh,
Mhm.
and then we fall into one of the many issues that we're having at the moment with the immigration system, that isn't so publicized and front and center in the media, and that is things like wait times. To take a spouse to the U.S. Would take 18 to 24 months. Um,
18 to 24 months?
yeah. So if I was married to a Brit and I decided I wanted to move back, not for a job or anything like that, because there is one path that we can explore when the U.S. citizen has a short notice job offer that can speed things up. But if I was just like, nah, I'm just ready to move back. I want to be back in America, but now I need to take my British husband. We would file a petition. It would pend for 17, 18 months. And then once it was approved, it has to flow through the steps until it gets to the embassy where the spouse would go and have an interview. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at 2 years before I could then decide to move. So if I have a sick mom who I need to be back in the US for quite quickly, um, I'm either going on my own or I'm going in 2 years. And it's
But is
so
but if
people get really surprised. No.
right. But no, but I mean, is this though a fairly recent phenomenon, or is this always the case?
It, our waiting times in the U.S. for visa services for all different things, whether that's applying for a petition or applying for a visa, our waiting times are generally exceptionally long, especially when we compare them to like the UK. My UK colleagues just can't understand why on earth my cases drag on for so long. They are. I mean, they take a very, very long time. So this isn't necessarily new, but and I think one of the things you hear often in the U.S. That is sort of an anti-immigrant position is, they should do it the right way. They should do it the legal way. And the problem is if there is a legal way for someone to go to the U.S., and I say if because our categories are very, very limited, and it's very difficult to get a visa to go to the U.S. long term. But if there was a way for them to go to the U.S., it takes forever. And I think it's yeah, it's obviously it's a big issue. So um, I think that these are things that people have to consider when they're coming here. Now, if just to kind of change because you'd asked what would happen if an American wanted to move back to the U.S. I'll just take that one step further. That let's say me as an American, I was here, I naturalized, I became British. And then I decided I wanted to renounce my US citizenship.
Hmm.
So I follow through that procedure. I give it up, and now I'm only a Brit. I'm still able to go to the US. That's not going to inhibit, me from the ability to travel, but it will put me in place just like everyone else, where I'll have to qualify for a visa if I want to go to the US long term to visit my mom. So these are some of the things we have to talk to clients about before they make these decisions to renounce. Do you really want to? Do you understand what it means after? You will not have a right to go live in America.
Is there any concern though that somebody who does renounce and then decides they want to go back, that they would be now, under the current climate here, viewed with a degree of suspicion, making it more difficult than it perhaps would have been?
I think it's a really good question. So far, I haven't seen any evidence of that. Do I think that that is completely out of the question forever? No. I think it's something people should at least think about. Not anything I'm seeing right now. Normally it's all very administrative. I do think, I have every now and again hear a report that the customs officer was a bit um, short with someone, a little bit judgmental, but generally it should be quite administrative. Now you're just a Brit and in you go. But yeah, is that something that I could see down the line being an issue? Sure.
I'm curious. I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast again, a sort of hypothetical. Suppose somebody in the UK or anywhere else actually in the world wants to send their child here in the U.S. Are they worried about for school, that kind of thing? Are they worried about that? I am curious, since both of you live in the UK. Is that just a hypothetical question, or do you know people who are going through that very debate?
I do, for sure. I mean,
You do.
yeah, absolutely. I'm contacted by clients on a regular basis who are planning to pursue a student visa, but they're still on the fence. They haven't decided if the US, and especially what happened just in the last few months with the complete suspension of student visas. Then they came back. Now they have to vet the social media and they have to have their profiles wide open, which is, in my opinion, unnecessary and very much an invasion of privacy. I mean, certainly my profile's not wide open on my social media, and I would want it to be. So I do think that parents are now still a little bit more cautious. Do I think that it's stopping them entirely? Definitely not. The US has a fantastic educational system. I mean, I suppose a good question would be, Zeena, would you send your kids to school in the United States?
Zena, would you?
Then you
I
see the same question.
Huh?
At this current time, I think that I would be quite reluctant to. Ask me in 5 years.
Why? But why?
I think it's what you see in the media, what's going on the ground, the general anti-immigrant sentiment that you see. I mean, it just doesn't seem very welcoming. As somebody that's British, that may wish to sort of relocate your whole family to a new country, I'm not sure that this feels like the best climate. Or I'd have hesitations, put it that way.
And you know what? It's really funny because I don't disagree. I would not send my children there. They don't need visas. They're American, but they're not going to go to school in the US. But I think, on the flip side, wearing my immigration lawyer hat, people are going. They are
Yeah.
going. It is not stopping people from getting visas, whether that's a student visa or, someone going on a work visa, taking their children with them, putting them in school. So I don't know that and I don't know what drives that. I don't know why one person might say, under no circumstances would I put my children in school because it seems unsafe and I don't like the political environment in the US. which are, things that I certainly have said myself. But on the other hand, another person says, let's go. What a great opportunity. Let's get our kids in this American school. This looks great. And that seems to be okay. And I think, people are going.
Well, but Christy, you were just now very adamant when you said, I wouldn't send my kids to school in the U.S. Why?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. And I think obviously this digresses from an immigration lawyer discussion and more of just an American living abroad discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
But we left the US for a lot of reasons. We left before the first Trump administration. The writing was on the wall, and that wasn't something that we were ready to sign on for. Um, I'm from the South. I'm from Texas. I wasn't really happy carrying around a newborn infant at the grocery store with automatic weapons. Just seemed to be extreme to me. But again, this is, there's people in Texas who are very happy that is, and that is their right. And I think obviously the school, school violence generally in the U.S., gun culture and violence in the U.S., plus the political divide. I think it's such a divisive country at the moment. It wasn't always this way, and it became a very angry country. The feeling became very angry. So we were quite happy to leave, and luckily the UK had a system where I was able to get a work visa and come in. In fact, I think Zeena may have
Changing now,
Christi.
Christy.
It is changing now, and I think this is the thing: is like the anti-immigrant sentiment is not isolated to the U.S. We're seeing it in the UK. We're seeing it in Europe. Anti-immigrant sentiment is a thing, and a thing that hopefully we continue to push back against. Because quite frankly, if you really nail down to someone what is it that they are against, it's not typically me being an immigrant. They're fine with me coming here. It's the other people, right? And
Yeah.
it becomes a race issue, and then it just becomes
Brilliantly.
it just becomes a racist. It's a racist divide, is really what it is. It's a race and class divide, and we're seeing it everywhere. It's not just the U.S. It's not just the U.K. And I think, so I think you're still going to see the movement of what is often called an expat. So you're an expat if I think you are, on this level, and you are an immigrant if you fall somewhere further down the line. When in reality, I'm an immigrant. I'm not an expat. I'm an immigrant.
Zing, I'm curious if when say Americans now saying that they want to come to the UK, do they have, do you think, from what they're telling you, do they have perhaps maybe a overly I don't know, maybe optimistic or unrealistic or maybe naive, I guess is the best word, really. Naive idea of what it would be like to pick up, leave the US and go to the UK. And by that, I mean, if they're coming, not for economic reasons, but for, they're coming because they worry about violence. Christy mentioned violence in the US, so they don't like the political system now with the Trump administration in the US. And they think, well, you know what? I'm going to move to the UK and life is going to be all roses and it's going to be great. Do you have to sometimes bring down some of their expectations if they're somewhat maybe unrealistic?
Well, in terms of when we discuss expectations with them, we do tend to limit it to, whether it's feasible to get a visa to come to the UK or not. So it's sort of limited in that respect. And typically, what is interesting is we do get a lot of inquiries from US nationals or from individuals that are residing in the UK as a non-US national. And many of those inquiries don't actually turn into an individual, at least initially, deciding that they want to up and leave. because of the limitations of the UK immigration system. So, for example, as I said before, you may need a family link, or you may need a job offer at a certain level. Now, that the restrictions on roles that can be filled in the UK has recently been tightened, and it's likely to be tightened further down the line. It's also expensive for employers, but also for individuals to one, apply for the for immigration permission, and to sponsor individuals from overseas. So from that perspective, in terms of actually realizing that idea of can I move and can I move now, often it's a not yet situation. As I say, it's very much exploratory. Let's think about it. Let's think about the long-term route here. And that's actually indicative of some of the recent trends that we're seeing and the figures that are coming out. I was looking at the statistics for US nationals comes for UK recently, and there isn't a notable surge in immigration for specific routes for entry to the UK. There's no notable surge. What we have seen an increase in is citizenship applications from US nationals. So you may be aware of this, but there's in the year to March 2025, there were over 6,000 British citizenship applications granted for US nationals, which is the highest on record. We've also seen a record number of applications for settlement by US nationals. Now, that's not necessarily indicative of, as I say, individuals fleeing the US immediately, because of the nature in which you obtain settlement or obtain citizenship, unless it's registration, which can be immediate, but the nature in which you typically obtain citizenship requires, say, 6 years in the UK, or 5 years if you're settling in the UK. There are some accelerated routes, but not many. So it's really a long-term plan that we're looking at. Trends for those who might be coming to the UK, I think we're yet to see the impact of one, the US administration and political motivations on those coming to the UK. I think we're probably going to wait a few years and then look back at the statistics on that. But also, as I mentioned, things are going to get stricter in terms of the immigration requirements in the UK. The UK government, they published what's called the Immigration White Paper back in May. And in that white paper, what they made clear is that they are looking to reduce net migration figures, which reached a peak in the year end in June 2023. So they're looking at reducing the numbers, even though actually since 2024, there's already a bit of a downward trend in net migration figures. And they're also looking on the work front, they're looking to align the reliance of employers in the UK on the overseas labour market, which includes the US nationals. They're looking to align that with the UK's industrial strategy. And in doing so, they are wanting employers and sectors to really focus their efforts on upskilling the domestic workforce, on investing within the UK before they seek to recruit from overseas. So because of certain policies and proposals that will be coming into effect in the coming years, this, of course, might naturally then impact US nationals and their ability to come to the UK, but also their desire as well to come to the UK. There was something recently that was mentioned in the white paper, and it's received a fair bit of controversy, which is that generally the qualifying period that you have to reside in the UK before you obtain settlement, currently that's typically 5 years. Now, the government has mentioned that they're looking to increase that across a number of routes to 10 years. And that's not as expensive for the individual, for their family members, and for employers who will have to increase the period of sponsorship. And there's been mention that, well, in certain circumstances, that qualifying period could be reduced for, say, contributions to the economy or to society. Now, that's not quite been defined yet. What we'll see as a result, likely, is that there might be a continued surge in settlement applications as people want to try and avoid being struck by the 10-year qualifying period. And then it might then dip because there might be a reluctance. And it's something that the UK government is certainly wanting to see, that sort of reduction in settlement applications.
Christy, from the point of view of somebody in the UK wanting to come to the US, are you noticing if there's any difference depending how it's handled, that is the case, depending upon even if the person is a British citizen, what their own background is? Is there a notable difference depending on the person's ethnicity, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think not markedly so when it comes to some of the more subjective review of, say, a petition that gets filed. What we are seeing a lot of, and this isn't new, but it's certainly is not letting up. If anything, it's the other direction, and this is what we call additional administrative processing for people who have applied for a visa. So I mean, for many, many years, when someone applies for a visa, they go through a vetting process. Uh, Although the administration has said that they need to increase vetting, our visa vetting process is exceptionally stringent already, always has been, um, or has been for a very long time. And so they go through this normal vetting process. They now are doing additional vetting and extreme vetting, if you will, for some individuals. But what will happen is they'll apply for their visa, and their case is sort of held in suspension. It's technically a denial, but it's held in suspension until they can get the sort of green light. And the Department of State explains that this is in conjunction with lots of different agencies. So lots of different government agencies will have an input on the security risks or concerns of an individual. And it may come as no surprise that the individuals who are being targeted for additional vetting, to the point that we just know it will happen, and we advise clients to expect it, are Russian nationals, Chinese nationals, especially where either of them have any education in specific fields, certain scientific fields, nuclear fields, certain tech fields, which could be considered security concerns. Um, Anyone with a Muslim background or name, they don't have to actually be a practicing Muslim. That's not one of the criteria. It's just a name. Or it could be, they may have never even been to, the Middle East ever. But because their dad or their granddad or, something, because sometimes you see it's because they lived on a street where someone of concern who is on a list lived. They have to do this additional vetting, and this could delay people's applications significantly. I mean, I'm not talking a matter of a few extra days of processing, months, weeks, months, sometimes years. Sometimes it's indefinite. They'll just never get a response. Which
These are people we're talking about who are British citizens, yes?
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And even born in the UK, yes?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this will happen with someone who's, let's say you have someone who's British but also has a second passport because they're maybe they were born in Russia, but now they've lived in the UK since they were 4 years old. They still have a passport, but they're also British, born and raised here, with school here. Absolutely going to be subjected to additional security measures.
Well,
Uh,
I'm curious, but I am curious about that, and this is to both of you. When we talk about more security measures, what do they actually do? You mentioned, Christy, that even if somebody perhaps lived on a street with somebody else living on that street was, for whatever reason, on the radar of U.S. Security agencies. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with London. I mean, the streets are pretty crowded, and a lot of people live on the street. Uh, How does one go about doing extra vetting on somebody like that? What do they do?
Well, I think it will involve multiple agencies. So, multiple intelligence agencies. The U.S. government is not very transparent as to exactly what, where it's going. Where does this case go? Who gets to look at it? Who's weighing in on it? So we don't really have that information. Um, but we do know that it is multiple agencies. So like the FBI is going to weigh in on it, and they may be getting information from just other government agencies. I think one thing to note here is that we're not alone. I know that Zeena will be able to comment. The UK does the same thing.
Yeah.
They're just more reasonable with some of the timeframes.
Right.
I mean, you're right, Christy, in that in terms of timing, I mean, we get applications processed in a much quicker time frame than in the US. And like you say, there's often liaison with multiple government agencies that are involved. Often, when an application's been outstanding for a long time, sometimes we would consider putting in further representations to almost reassure the Home Office. Sometimes we don't know what exactly is the holdup, but often it can be of assistance in terms of providing some context to the individual wanting to come to the UK, and also verifying their background and their history.
So to wrap up this particular episode, let me just ask a parting question to both of you. I have a feeling I know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you guys think that all the things that we've talked about, the difficulties perhaps of an American going to the UK or somebody in the UK wanting to come to the US and maybe being subjected to more security issues, do you foresee this getting worse in the near future, staying the same, getting better? I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it.
Go ahead, Zeena.
Unfortunately, I see it getting worse on the UK side, and that's indicative of, again, what's in the white paper in terms of the UK wanting to control its borders, reduce net migration figures, and increase security. So on that basis, I do see extra scrutiny being involved with applications from overseas.
Christy?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to say the exact same thing. I do think that we're going to continue to see a drive towards uh, the stumbling blocks, the things that they're being put in the way to make things harder, and that'll go across the board from visitors traveling to the U.S. on ESTA. One thing that we hadn't talked about, I'll just mention, is
Yeah.
about digital privacy, and it became a really hot topic recently because people were only learning that when you fly to the US, if you're not a US citizen, they can just take your phone and look at it. Customs and Border Protection officers can look through your phone, and that obviously scared a lot of people. The UK is known for being very data privacy driven, and the idea that a law enforcement officer with absolutely no reasonable suspicion whatsoever could just take your phone and have a go through it was really frightening. We got a lot of calls about that. That's not changing. That has actually always been the case, but I think we're seeing an increase in it actually happening, and people are worried and nervous. So do I think it's going to get better? No, I think that we're going to continue to see really strict borders across the board, Brits and everyone else included. And I think we're going to see continued, difficulty with processing visa applications for the duration of this administration, which I will tell you is 1,270 days from now. I have a counter on my phone. It will be better.
Zeena Luchowa and Christy Jackson, partners in the Laura Devine Immigration law firm in London. I thank you both for taking the time to be with us on this podcast, SOS America. And for those of you who are watching or listening to this, again, we do welcome any comments you may have. You can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts from. Until the next episode, I'm Charles Feldman. Thank you all.